Unsurprisingly, Johnny Fisher gives Alen Babic the boshing of a lifetime, takes him out in about 30 seconds of the first round. Not really surprising. Many of you guys will have seen my pre-fight video that I did on this, and I picked Johnny Fisher to win in the first 3 rounds. I was pretty confident that he would absolutely smash Alen Babic to pieces. That's exactly what he did. And I know many other people were picking Johnny Fisher to do the same thing. A lot of the polls on YouTube, I know Hatman did one. Obviously, you get some from like DAZN and Matchroom Boxing. And the vast majority of people, I want to say 80% plus, were typically picking Johnny Fisher to win and win by knockout too. And so, yeah, the fight really unfolded as the majority of rational boxing fans expected. And so I don't really know what there is to say about this fight, because it wasn't really a fight. It was essentially the boxing equivalent of an execution, and a very predictable one at that, because you just had to look at the recent form of Alen Babic, as well as obviously understanding what kind of fighter he is, because Babic is a fun fighter. I've gone on record before saying that, you know, it's not the highest level boxing, but yeah, he's quite fun, Babic, you know, because he comes in and he looks to take the other guy's head off, and he doesn't really think too much about what's coming back, so it makes for an entertaining watch. However, we all knew really that Babic, he wasn't going to do anything. He wasn't going to cement any kind of legacy. He was just going to be a fun gimmick type fighter for while it lasted. And it seems that it's probably come to a close now for Babic. I've seen many people nicknaming him the cabbage instead of the savage, and that's something I've been doing for a while, because maybe in poor taste, but Babic, he seems like he's done. I don't think this guy's got many days in boxing left. He's clearly showing signs of being shop worn. I don't really think he can carry on. I don't think the punch resistance there is there. And that's the thing. I think Babic especially is, you know, you could potentially use this as a cautionary tale of, yes, having an immense fighting spirit and, you know, this kind of warrior mentality that Babic has. But if you don't cultivate your skill, and if you don't cultivate your boxing ability, and you just look to trade on your ferociousness and your toughness, yeah, that's probably not going to get you very far. I don't think it does. The likelihood that you're going to be able to really last a long time in boxing to make any kind of meaningful legacy come together, yeah, it's probably not the way. Don't get me wrong, there have been fighters of the past who've been immensely tough, you know, granite jaws. They really trade on their toughness, but Babic isn't that guy, and I think a lot of his toughness has been worn down in the gym, because he's not someone who's had many fights in a professional ring. Of course, he's had a fairly long amateur career. I believe he had 100 plus amateur fights, and so that obviously has an effect too. You accumulate plenty of damage in the amateurs, but just knowing Babic's character, where he has this kind of gung-ho, never say never attitude, and just gets, you know, every time he's in the ring, it's balls to the wall, it's 100%. Yeah, that's admirable in some sense, but also it's very unwise, because you're just going to leave your best form in the gym. You're going to leave so many different pieces of you in the gym that come fight night, there's not going to be anything left. And that's what we're seeing now from Babic, where when he's in against someone who actually has a chance of landing on him, yeah, it's probably going to be good night, especially if he's up at heavyweight. And obviously people have spoken about his comments around the Steve Robinson fight. That Steve Robinson is useless, and I say that with the greatest deal of respect. Steve Robinson doesn't have a place in boxing because he can't do anything in a boxing ring. You know, he refers to himself as Disney Drago, or that's at least what's written on his trunks. He's more of a dismal Drago, if I'm being honest, because yeah, Steve Robinson has no place in a professional boxing ring. And so if you're Alen Babic, you can't really make any kind of gauge of where you are, what kind of form you're in, what kind of shape you're in, because Steve Robinson offers no resistance. But here we saw up against a young, big, athletic, strong, and ambitious heavyweight in Johnny Fisher, that as soon as he lands, that's really it. As I say, this wasn't really much of a fight. This was just a countdown, essentially, until Johnny Fisher landed a glove on Alen Babic's chin. And as soon as he did, Babic was doing a funny dance. So I don't have any problems with the stoppage. Yeah, it was the main event, but it wasn't for a title or anything. This is a fight between two guys who've had, roughly about 10 fights. So, and realistically, Babic, he was all over the shop, and it was only 2 fights ago he was taken out in the first round as well, I believe it was. So, yeah, I don't think there's really that much to take from it. I don't think Johnny Fisher's going to take that much from it, because obviously the fight was it was over before it even started. But maybe it's just like a little taster of what it's like to be a main event. Although he obviously has this cult following, he draws a lot of crowd. Well, say a lot, something like 1,500 people, which, that's not an insignificant amount, but it's hardly 80,000 at Wembley. But there's a little bit of a spotlight on him, at least in his hometown, amongst his hometown fans, and he's gonna need to kind of get his nerves under wraps, because if he carries on like this, the crowds are going to get bigger and bigger, assuming that he fights opposition that actually draws a crowd, which is, of course, another topic of discussion, is what does Johnny Fisher do next? Because I personally, I think there is something there with Johnny Fisher. I spoke about this before the fight. I think there are some raw materials there, and some very good raw materials, but they are still raw. I see Johnny Fisher probably getting to British title level, probably even winning the British title. I think anything beyond that, based on what I've seen so far, would be him overachieving. But ultimately, he's in his mid-20s, so time is on his side. Obviously, we know heavyweights tend to age a bit better as well. So, let's say he retires at 35. He's still got a good 10 years in him, potentially. And if that 10 years is managed well and takes the right fights at the right time, I think Johnny Fisher does have a decent future in the sport. And, when I talk about his raw materials, he's clearly very athletic. He's big, he's strong naturally, but he's also quite explosive. He's quite quick. Not sure what his gas tank is like, so we'll have to see how that holds up, assuming that anyone can take him round. It's the inexperience for Johnny Fisher, which is understandable because he's got virtually no amateur experience. And what was this? Was this his 10th fight? So very, very early days. But you know what? I've got to give Johnny Fisher credit, because I haven't followed him too closely. But whenever I've seen any interviews of him, any kind of media where he's talking about himself and what he's aiming for, he does seem like someone who's got his head screwed on. He doesn't look like he's the kind of guy who gets carried away. He seems quite grounded. And I've got to be honest, he seems like a decent guy. So I wish him all the best. And I think he's going to have to kind of keep that realistic, grounded kind of mindset if he hopes to really get the most out of his ability, because he's starting at quite a deficit. Because there have been other heavyweights, especially, who have had limited amateur experience, but they've been, I think, a bit more naturally inclined to take up boxing. As I say, I think Johnny Fisher, his background is rugby, so yeah, he might be a good all-round athlete, but some people, they just take to boxing like it's their sport. I think the jury's still out as to whether that's him, because he still does look quite amateurish and quite novice-y. So really, we're just going to have to watch this space. But you know what? I can't say I'm a fan. I'm not really a fanatic of anyone, but I'll be keeping a closer eye on Johnny Fisher. Not that this performance really sets the world alight, because it doesn't. He did what he was supposed to do. He did what myself and many other people expected him to do. But as I say, there's something about Johnny Fisher's character that I do think he's going to get at least something done. And it'll be interesting to see him against other younger prospects who are coming with their own ambition. Because with Alen Babic, his fighting spirit is really the only thing he's running on these days. And, you know, that's a very admirable and important trait to have, that fighting spirit, that ferocity, that heart. But it doesn't do you a lot of good when you're flat on your back, you know, separated from your senses. So we need to see Johnny Fisher in against some stiffer competition, some more durable competition, who actually have some ambition and ability of their own before we can really gauge. For now, I think, don't get me wrong, this is a good result for Johnny Fisher, but it doesn't tell us that much other than that Alen Babic is officially the cabbage rather than the savage. So, yeah, that's my take on this. As I say, I'm not really sure what else I can say about this one. But, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Johnny Fisher goes on to do next. And, yeah, I, for one, will be keeping a closer eye. I can't say I'm going to be following his fights fanatically, but be interesting to see who they match him with next. But for now, I'll leave it there. You can leave your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you make of this performance? And what do you make of Johnny Fisher going forward? Do you think he can get anything done? And who would you like to see him in against next? If you were managing Johnny Fisher, guiding him to greatness, what would you choose for him? So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video.